Welcome to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving deep into Nassim Nicholas Taleb's Antifragile, Things That Gain from Disorder.
A really fascinating, sometimes challenging book.
Absolutely. And we know you, our listener, love getting knowledge quickly, but, thoroughly. You want those aha moments without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Right. Aiming for that balance between a good summary and those memorable details. Clear structure, engaging delivery.
Exactly. So let's unpack the core of Antifragile. What's the big idea?
Well, what immediately jumps out is how Taleb really challenges our basic categories for how things react to stress, to disorder.
Okay.
Usually we think, okay, something's fragile, like glass. It breaks under pressure. The opposite, we tend to think robust or resilient, something that just, resists the pressure and stays the same.
Like a rock, maybe?
Exactly, like a rock. But Taleb says, hold on, that's not the true opposite of fragile. He introduces this third category, the antifragile.
Antifragile. Okay, so what does that mean?
It's not just about resisting harm. It's about systems that actually benefit from shocks, from volatility, from randomness, from disorder. They get stronger.
Okay, so like working out. Your muscles get stressed, but then they grow stronger.
That's a perfect example he uses. The stressor actually leads to improvement. It's not just surviving the hit. It's using the hit to get better.
I like his package analogy, too. That really clicked for me.
Oh, yeah, the shipping labels. Explain that one.
Well, the fragile package, it needs that handle with care label, right? Very sensitive.
Means tranquility.
The robust one maybe doesn't need any label. It can take a few bumps. It's indifferent.
It just endures.
But the anti-fragile package, Taleb jokes it should say, please mishandle, because the shaking, the disorder, actually helps it somehow.
It thrives on that variability. It immediately makes you rethink how you approach challenges, doesn't it? Not just things to avoid, maybe things that some systems actually need.
Definitely. So this forms his triad.
Exactly. The triad. Fragile, robust, and anti-fragile. Fragile wants calm, gets harmed by unexpected events. Robust doesn't really care much either way, just resists. Anti-fragile. It actually feeds on that disorder, grows from it.
And he argues that modern life, well, it often gets this wrong.
Completely. He thinks our obsession with smoothing everything out, controlling everything from the top down, creating stability, it often backfires.
How so?
By trying to eliminate all the small bumps and stresses, we inadvertently make the system more fragile to the big shocks we didn't see coming. We prevent the learning, the adaptation that comes from dealing with minor chaos.
Like helicopter parenting, but for entire systems.
Sort of, yeah. You shield it from everything, and it never develops its own resilience, its own antifragility. Bottom-up systems, he argues, the ones that evolve through trial and error, tend to handle disorder much better.
Okay, and this is where skin in the game comes in. It feels central to his argument.
It's absolutely critical. For Taleb, it's not just a business phrase. It's like a core ethical and practical principle.
Right.
He argues that major fragility is created when people or institutions can get the upside from risk, but they don't bear the downside if things go wrong. They're insulated.
Like the classic example of bankers taking huge risks with other people's money. Big bonuses if it works out, taxpayer bailout if it doesn't.
Precisely that.
Yeah.
They have the potential for anti-fragility benefiting from volatility, but they push the fragility, the potential harm, onto others.
And Taleb has a pretty strong ethical rule about this.
He does. It's basically, thou shalt not have anti-fragility at the expense of the fragility of others. It's about recognizing that these things are connected. Your gain shouldn't come directly from making someone else more vulnerable.
That really makes you look hard at incentive structures, doesn't it? Who benefits? Who pays the price?
Absolutely. In finance, politics, even in medicine sometimes.
So for you, the listener, maybe the first big takeaway is real strength isn't just surviving shocks, it's maybe even benefiting from them, and crucially, doing it ethically without making others pay for your upside.
Well said. And this idea of shocks and disorder naturally leads into Taleb's famous concept, the black swan.
Right, the unpredictable, massive events.
Exactly. Not just unlikely things, but things that are fundamentally unpredictable before they happen has a huge impact. And then, crucially, we try to explain them away after the fact as if they should have been predictable.
Like major financial crashes or huge technological breakthroughs, maybe?
Those are classic examples. He argues most of history is actually driven by these outliers, yet we spend all our time trying to predict the ordinary, the mundane fluctuations.
And why are they so hard to predict?
Because, he says, the complex systems we live in, economies, ecosystems, societies, they're full of hidden interdependencies. Things are connected in ways we don't see.
Okay.
And they exhibit nonlinear responses. meaning you double the input, you don't necessarily get double the output. Sometimes a tiny change can cause a massive shift, or a big change does almost nothing.
So our usual cause and effect thinking doesn't really work.
It can be really misleading in these complex domains. Simple causal links are often an illusion.
So if we can't predict black swans, what's the point?
That's key. Taleb says, forget about predicting them. Focus on fragility. Identify things that are vulnerable to black swans and try to build systems that are robust or, even better, antifragile to them. The goal isn't prediction, it's preparedness through structure.
Less forecasting, more building resilience.
Exactly. And he does acknowledge the usefulness of heuristics, mental shortcuts, rules of thumb.
Right.
They're practical ways to navigate complexity, even if they aren't perfect. We just need to remember they are imperfect, not mistake them for scientific laws.
And all these ideas, anti-fragility, black swans, nonlinearity heuristics, they fit into his bigger picture.
Right, what he calls the inserto. It's his whole collection of works dealing with uncertainty, randomness, probability, and how we make decisions when we just don't and can't know everything.
Okay, let's dig a bit more into that nonlinearity idea. You mentioned it makes prediction hard.
Yes, and it's crucial for understanding fragility. Taleb uses this great illustration. What's worse, getting hit by a single 10-pound stone or getting hit by, say, 1,000 tiny pebbles that add up to 10 pounds?
I'd definitely take the pebbles. The single stone sounds much worse.
Right. The total weight is the same, but the impact is nonlinear. One large shock can be devastatingly more harmful than the sum of many small stresses.
And that applies to systems, too.
Absolutely. Small, frequent stressors can actually be beneficial for an antifragile system, like those pebbles, or like exercise. But large, rare shocks, the black swans, can break a fragile system.
So how do we spot this fragility, this vulnerability to big shocks?
He offers a really simple, elegant rule. Look for asymmetry. Anything that has more potential downside than potential upside from random events, from volatility, is fragile.
More to lose than to gain from surprises.
Exactly. Think about being heavily in debt. A small positive surprise might help a little, but a large negative surprise, losing your job, could be catastrophic. That asymmetry screams fragility.
This connects to convexity and concavity, right? They sound a bit technical.
They can be, but the core idea is visual. Think of a graph plotting outcomes against volatility. A fragile system has a concave response, like a frowny face curve. Bad events hurt it more than good events of the same size help it.
Okay, disproportionate downside.
Right. An antifragile system has a convex response, like a smiley face curve. It gains more from positive surprises than it loses from negative ones of similar magnitude. It likes volatility.
Got it. And he gives real-world examples of this nonlinearity.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
Traffic, like we mentioned, adding one car might do nothing, then suddenly adding one more causes gridlock. That's nonlinear.
Right.
Or the size of companies. He argues very large corporations can become disproportionately fragile, bureaucratic, slow to adapt compared to smaller, more nimble ones. Their sheer size creates hidden vulnerabilities.
Project management, too.
Yeah, those huge multi-year mega projects. They seem much more prone to massive cost overruns and failures than smaller, iterative projects where you can course correct more easily. The potential downside gets amplified non-linearly.
And this leads to a really counterintuitive point about stability.
Yes, the time bomb called stability. It sounds weird, right? We usually think stability is good.
Always.
But Taleb argues that artificially suppressing volatility, trying to make everything perfectly smooth and predictable, can be dangerous. It allows hidden risks, unseen fragilities to build up beneath the surface unnoticed.
Like preventing small forest fires, which then allows dead wood to accumulate, making the inevitable eventual fire much, much worse.
That's a classic analogy for it. By avoiding the small, manageable disruptions, you set the stage for a catastrophic one later. Sometimes, he suggests, a system needs those small wars or stresses to avoid the prison of suppressed accumulating risk.
So for you listening, maybe take a look at areas in your life or work that seem really stable. Is it genuine robustness, or could it be masking a fragility that's just waiting for a shock?
It's a useful question to ask. Which brings us to the whole issue of prediction itself.
Taleb isn't a big fan, is he?
That's putting it mildly. He sees our modern obsession with forecasting, especially in complex systems like economics or politics, as mostly futile and often harmful.
Why harmful?
Because believing we can predict makes us take risks we shouldn't. And the interventions we make based on faulty predictions can often make things worse, increasing fragility.
So the anti-fragile approach isn't about better prediction.
Not at all. He says robust and anti-fragile systems don't need accurate predictions. Think about redundancy, having extra cash reserves, or backup generators.
Right, you don't need to predict when the power will go out, you just have the backup ready.
Exactly. It's a non-predictive strategy for dealing with uncertainty. You build in slack, buffers, optionality so you can handle surprises when they arrive, whatever they are.
This is the non-turkey idea, isn't it?
Yeah, the famous turkey analogy. The turkey gets fed every single day by the farmer. Every day confirms its belief that farmers are benevolent providers of food.
Builds a great statistical model of safety.
Right up until the day before Thanksgiving. Then, a sudden, unexpected, catastrophic event completely invalidates its predictive model. Taleb's point is, don't be the turkey. Don't get lulled into a false sense of security by past stability, especially in complex domains.
Always be aware that the black swan could be around the corner.
And be structured to survive, or even benefit if it is. This also ties into his critique of iatrogenics.
Iatrogenics, that's harm caused by the healer, right? Medical harm.
Originally, yes. But Taleb applies it much more broadly. Harm caused by any intervention, even with good intentions. Trying to fix something complex often breaks it in new ways.
Because we don't fully understand the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a bias towards action. It's often easier to sell, look what I did, than look what I avoided by doing nothing. So people intervene even when restraint might be better.
He even finds virtue in procrastination sometimes.
A specific kind, yes. What he calls Fabian procrastination, named after the Roman general Fabius, who defeated Hannibal by avoiding direct battle and using delaying tactics.
So it's not laziness, it's strategic waiting.
Right. Allowing time for more information to emerge, or for natural healing or corrective processes to work, before jumping in with potentially harmful interventions. It protects against errors from acting too soon.
And time itself is important here.
Hugely important. He distinguishes between the naturalistic fallacy, wrongly assuming that whatever is natural is automatically good, and what he calls naturalistic instinct. He thinks we should pay more attention to things that have survived for a long, long time.
Why?
Because time is the ultimate filter. Fragile things eventually break under the stresses of time and randomness. Things that survive for centuries or millennia, certain customs, technologies, ideas, likely have some inherent robustness or antifragility. The Lindy effect, he calls it sometimes.
So longevity is a sign of resilience.
It's a pretty good indicator, yeah.
Yeah.
Fragile things get weeded out over time.
Okay, so for you listening, maybe the takeaway here is be skeptical of forecasts in complex areas. Question the need for constant intervention. Build buffers and respect the wisdom embedded in things that have stood the test of time. Sometimes doing less is more anti-fragile.
Precisely. Now, let's shift gears slightly to how Taleb views knowledge and intelligence in this context.
Okay. He seems wary of purely academic or theoretical knowledge.
Very much so. He critiques what he calls lecturing birds how to fly. The idea that complex skills or systems can be fully understood or improved through top-down abstract theorizing alone.
He prefers practical wisdom.
Absolutely. Knowledge gained through tinkering, through trial and error, through having skin in the game. He thinks we often mistake the unintelligible, complex academic theories for the intelligent and dismiss practical, hand-on knowledge as somehow less sophisticated.
Even though it might be more effective in the real world.
Often, yes. This leads to his sucker-non-sucker distinction.
Oh, okay, what's that about?
He argues that in real life, especially under uncertainty, the key isn't always about being abstractly right or wrong in your beliefs. It's about your exposure. Are you positioned to benefit if things go well, non-sucker? Or are you positioned to get wiped out if things go badly, sucker? Payoff asymmetry is more important than theoretical truth.
So focus on the potential consequences, not just the theory.
Right. And be wary of the illusion of control, especially in big bureaucracies or top-down systems. People might think they're making crucial decisions, but the outcomes might be largely driven by randomness or the system's own dynamics.
He uses libraries as an example of something anti-fragile here.
Yes, libraries endure through time. They actually benefit from the accumulation of knowledge. New books arrive, old ones might still be valuable. They aren't easily destroyed by single events and tend to grow stronger over time.
And optionality is important too, like Thales and the olive presses.
That's a great story he uses. Thales, the philosopher, supposedly used his knowledge to predict a good olive harvest, rented all the olive presses cheaply in advance, and then made a fortune when demand soared.
So he had the option to profit massively, but his initial risk was small.
Exactly. That's optionality, big potential upside, limited downside. Antifragile systems often have this characteristic.
He also talks about the wheeled suitcase, which seems mundane but makes a powerful point.
It really does. For decades, we had suitcases and we had wheels. But it took a surprisingly long time for someone, a pilot, not an engineer, to just put wheels on the suitcase.
A simple, practical innovation that was somehow overlooked.
Right. Taleb uses it to illustrate how sometimes the most valuable innovations are practical, bottom-up solutions, often missed by overly intellectual or theoretical approaches focused on complexity.
And there's often a gap between discovery and use.
Yes, the translational gap. An idea or discovery might exist, but it takes time, sometimes a lot of time, for it to be translated into practical application. This gap can be widened by academic noise, professional gatekeeping, or incentives that don't favor real-world implementation.
So this leads him to critique traditional education.
Somewhat, yes. He's skeptical of purely classroom-based learning, divorced from real-world consequences and experimentation. He favors more of a barbell approach to education.
Barbell, like the investment strategy.
Similar idea. Combine the theoretical, maybe the classics, the rigorous stuff, with lots of hands-on, practical experience, tinkering, learning by doing, facing small failures. Avoid the mushy middle ground of just learning theories without application.
So for you listening, maybe reflect on how you learn. Are you getting enough real-world feedback? Are you balancing theory with practice, maybe even embracing small mistakes as learning opportunities?
It's about making your learning process itself more anti-fragile.
Okay, let's talk ethics again. Skin in the game was key, but how else does this fragility-anti-fragility dynamic play out ethically?
Well, the core ethical problem he identifies is the transfer of fragility, the agency problem. When someone acts on behalf of others like a fund manager, a politician, a doctor, but doesn't share the consequences of their actions.
They get the benefits if things go well, but the client, the patient, the taxpayer bears the cost if things go badly.
Exactly. He names specific economists and policymakers he feels exemplify this lack of skin in the game, leading to actions that benefited them or their theories, but increased fragility for society.
And this can lead to strange situations, ethically.
Yes, what he calls ethical inversion, where the collective consensus might be demonstrably wrong or harmful, but individuals within the system find it hard to speak out or act differently because the incentives punish dissent. People get trapped endorsing opinions they might privately disagree with.
Like groupthink, but with real consequences.
Right. And this applies especially to those who make predictions or recommend interventions without personal risk, the talker's free option.
Academics, pundits, consultants.
Anyone whose advice or forecast carries no personal cost if it proves wrong. Taleb argues we should be deeply skeptical of advice from people who don't have skin in the game. Their incentives aren't aligned with good outcomes, necessarily.
He also contrasts corporations and artisans here.
Yeah, he sees large corporations, especially ones far removed from their customers, as often being able to profit by selling products or services that actually increase fragility for the user or for society. Think maybe processed foods, complex financial products, things that externalize risk.
Whereas an artisan,
a baker, a craftsperson, usually has direct accountability. Their reputation is on the line with every transaction. They have immediate skin in the game. It's a more ethically grounded relationship, he suggests.
and this scales up to the tyranny of the collective.
Yes, the idea that mistakes made collectively, especially when driven by flawed expert consensus or models without skin in the game, he often points to economics, can be far more damaging than individual errors. Blindly following conventional wisdom can lead whole systems off a cliff.
So a key ethical check for you, the listener. When evaluating advice or systems, always ask, who has skin in the game here? Are the incentives aligned with avoiding harm?
It's a powerful heuristic. Okay, so we've covered the problems, the concepts. What about solutions? How do we actually become more anti-fragile?
Right, the practical strategies. The barbell strategy comes up again.
Yes, it's central. It's about managing uncertainty by playing the extremes and avoiding the middle.
How does that work in practice?
Well, in finance, it could mean keeping most of your assets in extremely safe things, like cash or government bonds, and putting a small portion into highly speculative, high-potential upside bets. You avoid the moderate risk investments that might still blow up unexpectedly.
So maximum safety combined with maximum potential upside from a small base.
Exactly. Protect yourself from ruinous negative black swans while giving yourself exposure to potentially massive positive black swans. He applies this logic to health. Avoid chronic moderate stress, embrace occasional intense stressors, careers, even education, like we discussed.
And then there's via negativa, Subtraction, not addition.
This is huge for Taleb. In complex systems where we don't understand all the interactions, it's often safer and more effective to focus on what not to do, what to remove.
Like, instead of asking what supplements should I take, ask what junk food should I eliminate?
Perfect example. Focus on removing the sources of fragility, bad habits, unnecessary complexities, exposures with hidden risks, rather than trying to add complicated solutions on top. He even talks about subtractive prophecy.
Predicting the future by removing things.
Yeah, identifying what's fragile and likely to break or disappear, rather than trying to predict what new things will emerge. It's often easier to see what won't last.
This connects to less is more.
Definitely. Simpler methods, simpler models, less reliance on noisy data. He argues complex forecasting models often perform worse than simple heuristics because they try to capture too much noise. Focusing on the key signals, often through subtraction, is more robust.
So simplify, remove the fragile, focus on avoidance in complex situations.
And finally, embrace time and disorder. Recognize that time is the great tester, revealing what's fragile, and accept that a certain amount of stress, volatility, and disorder isn't just unavoidable, it's necessary for learning, adaptation, and building true antifragility.
Don't pathologize every small setback or fluctuation.
Exactly. Allow systems the space to learn from mistakes.
So for you listening, think about applying the barbell in your own decisions. Where can you combine safety with optionality? And where can you use via negativa subtraction to simplify and remove fragility rather than adding complexity?
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. Let's bring it all together for you, our listener.
Right. Nassim Nicholas Taleb's Antifragile. It's a really powerful lens, isn't it, for looking at a world that's just full of uncertainty, surprises, disorder.
It absolutely is. It forces you to shift your thinking away from just trying to resist shocks or predict them toward actually figuring out how to benefit from them. Moving beyond fragile and robust.
Understanding that core difference, fragile, robust, anti-fragile, and then thinking about nonlinearity, black swans, skin in the game, these concepts give you a new toolkit.
And remembering those ethical dimensions. Who benefits, who carries the risk. Building anti-fragility shouldn't come at the expense of others.
So you can start using these ideas to look at your own life, your work, the systems around you, and ask, how can I make this less fragile, maybe even anti-fragile? How can I build in robustness, optionality?
And remember Taleb's core argument. Often the best way isn't more prediction, more control, more intervention. Sometimes it's about creating environments that embrace stressors, that learn from mistakes, that love a bit of randomness. Via negativa, the barbell.
It's a deep book with a lot more nuance and examples than we could cover here. So if this sparked your interest, definitely delve deeper. You can grab a copy of Antifragile using the link in the description.
Highly recommended. Even if you don't agree with everything, it certainly makes you think.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this deep dive and want to explore more thought-provoking books with us, please do subscribe to Books and Bytes.
We'll see you next time.